And we'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is the approval of our August 14th, 2024 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 14th, 2024 regular meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or corrections? All those in favor of accepting the August 14, 2024 meeting minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries 4-0-1. Next on the agenda is delegations. Delegations is where anyone can discuss something that's on the agenda tonight. Members of the public, so if there's something on our agenda tonight, this is the point where the public could address us. Later on in the meeting, we do have public discussion where people can address anything that would come before the Board of Finance. So I think I mixed that up earlier today in my discussion with you, but the reason why we have delegations in the beginning is if we were going to be voting on something tonight on the agenda, we would want to hear public statements about that item first. So is there anyone here that wanted to speak directly to something on the agenda tonight?
We don't have a copy of the agenda.
Okay. Is there copies up on the... And just also for future reference, we do post the agendas on the town website a couple of days prior to the meeting. So, if not for any of the agenda items, then we'll move on to the public discussion. Okay. All right. So no delegations. Reports is next. Our first selectman, Mr. Cunningham.
Okay.
That worked.
Thank you. Good. Appreciate that. Okay, good evening. Couple of things I think of interest. One of the challenges we have in a town, even a small town of this size, is there are a lot of freedom of information requests that come in. And, recently we've had training on how to know what to do when there's a request. But one of the challenges is making sure that we track all the requests as they come in and we're not missing one. And someone gets a request and then they don't report it properly, or we don't know who's handling it. So what we've done is we've created a system. There's software out there you can buy to accomplish this, but we've come up with a system I think is going to work well for us. We've established not a website, but a email address for FOIA requests. And what we will do is those that are the more frequent requesters, let them know that that is the place to begin. Please file your request at this email address. And then in addition to that, other requests that come in, maybe someone writes it just on a piece of paper and comes to the town clerk, we will enter that also. We'll scan it and enter that into this email address. So we will have one place at the tip of the pyramid where we can look to really understand and see any requests that have come in We'll have an automated response, so we comply right away with the first requirement of a FOIA request, that you respond, that you've received it. And then we'll also have a spreadsheet that we've been working on, and Stacy, our human resources manager, she's been very helpful in coming up with designing a spreadsheet. And so we're going to capture that information so that we can track it. I'll be able to look at it. Sandy, my secretary, will be able to look at it. So will council be able to look at it. So we will be able to track what's going on and try to respond in a timely fashion to these requests and assign it to the person that ought to be compiling the information. So this is a new thing, and I think it's going to be very helpful and for the town and keep us out of harm's way with respect to FOIA requests. The other thing I'd like to mention is an earlier meeting today. As you probably know, we've been negotiating with the East Lyme Ambulance Service, and we really, I think, achieved, there's where there was some kind of butting of heads before, we really achieved goodwill between the East Lyme Fire Service and the ambulance service. And I think we're going to have an agreement probably, hopefully the next time that I address this board, I'll have some good news. But we really are in agreement on all the major points of an agreement. So I'm really happy to report that. And I think that'll go a long way to really solidifying the changes that I've tried to make with the fire service and the ambulance service. And they're working together, and it's going to be a good thing. Also, at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, we did appoint 2 members to a committee to meet with the unaffiliated group, and so we can start discussing the future financial things with them. So those are my 3 items that I'd like to bring to your attention tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is report from our finance director, Kevin Gervais.
So besides the new business items, I don't really have much to report. I'll be sending out finalized, unaudited fiscal 24 revenues and expenditures, hopefully later next week. One thing to report, our auditor, Nicoletta McTigue from CLA, is leaving the firm, and our new partner will be Jessica Aniskoff. Nicoletta's last day will be the 18th. So next Friday, I'm pretty sure. So we'll work with them on an updated timeline for our 23 audit and our 24 audit. And we're just trying to close out 24 and keep 2 accounting systems open at the same time. So that's what we're working on in the finance office, merging the data from the old legacy system to our new Munis system. So right now we're working on payroll, bringing over all the payroll files. Next week we have our budget meetings for the first quarter. So end of next week we'll have a much better picture of 25's budget and where it stands.
Have you worked out with Board of Ed how they're going to manage doing their budget with the 2-system issue, not being able to roll it back?
So discussions with our implementer at Munis, we'd have to do a hard close in 23, and we don't have that audit done yet. So I guess we could adjust the numbers at the first beginning balance of 24, but our numbers wouldn't match the audit for 23 in the system. So it's just maybe a workaround to do, but at the moment it doesn't appear we're going to have budgeting for 26 in Munis with all the fiscal years open.
So then we'll have to rely on Excel or?
So on the town side, we're rolling forward the budgets, the budget books this week, in anticipation to hand them out next week during our first quarter budget review. So we're using Excel for 1 more year.
Does anyone have any questions for Kevin? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is new business, an appointment to the Board of Finance. So unfortunately, Jake Ginsburg moved out of town, and so he had to resign. We want to thank him for his service. He was with us for almost a year and, made meaningful contributions throughout. So We will miss him, but by the terms of our town's charter, the Board of Finance can appoint someone to fill out his term, and as long as we do it within 30 days, we're good. If we fail to do that within 30 days, it would then go on to the Board of Selectmen to make that assignment. So do I have a motion to appoint a member?
Yes.
Richard?
I'd like to nominate Scott McAllister to join the Board of Finance. Scott's been living in East Lyme a couple of years or so. He's very interested in the community, appreciates the community, and wants to give back. He and I share a little bit of backgrounds in the field of virology. I was more on the vaccine end, but I did deal with a little bit of antivirals as Scott deals with. He has an excellent background, is very data oriented, which goes a long way for the Board of Finance and helps us keep the numbers rolling along. And as I nominate Scott, as you had mentioned, Denise, I'd like to thank Jay for the service that he provided this last year. He did survive the budget season,
Yeah.
so Scott, you're going to make it more than one budget season. But I'd like to nominate Scott to fill the empty slot.
And I'd like to second that. I've had the opportunity to speak with Dr. McAllister, and I am impressed with his CV, and I think he'll be a welcome addition. Anyone have any comments? All those in favor of appointing Dr. Scott McAllister to the Board of Finance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. No abstentions. The motion carries 500. I'd like to invite you up to join us for the rest of the meeting.
Just gotta get sworn in.
Oh, that's right. So you've got to get sworn in with the town clerk tomorrow, but in the meantime, you're certainly welcome to walk through our agenda with us. We just won't be official.
You're going to walk through the agenda from here or up there?
You can come on up here. We're not that. And I'd also like to point out I left the Board of Finance bylaws there for your perusal. And according to our bylaws, one of the things we do is appoint a mentor to get someone grounded in how the Board of Finance works. So do I have a volunteer to be a mentor?
Oh my God.
Since I nominated him, guess I'll be a mentor for Scott.
Sounds great. Thank you for volunteering. So going forward, Richard will touch base with you and kind of make sure you know what's happening.
Thanks. I'll be a good learner.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Next under new business is the assessor presentation. Diane Vitigliano is our assessor, so the mic's yours.
Good evening. Thank you so much. I wanted to address you this evening to talk about the new legislative changes that have just been enacted that are going to have an impact on our grand list. So I thought, what better way to do it than to give you a PowerPoint? Our grand list basically is broken up into the three different categories, as you know, with real estate representing close to 90%, motor vehicles almost 7.25%, and the rest being made up with personal property at just under 3%. The new legislation is going to impact all three of these categories. The motor vehicle legislation is going to impact both our motor vehicle and our personal property grand list, and the new veterans legislation will impact both our real estate and our motor vehicle. So right now, or previously, the way our motor vehicles were priced, we would get a list every year from DMV. We have about over 18,000 motor vehicles here in town. And DMV would provide us a list of everything that was registered in our town as of October 1st. They would run the basic list through JD Power using the VINs and give us prices on the basic automobiles. All of the unpriced vehicles, which would be models where you put in the VIN and it gives you like multiple options, 4 or 5 different options. Incomplete vehicles, which in what we get are just the price for the cab and chassis. And it's our job to figure out what's on the back end of that vehicle. It could be an oil tank, it could be a wood chipper, a tow truck, an amusement ride in some cases. And so it's our job to figure out what's on the back end and to price it. And also trailers, we price all of the trailers. So that leads us to our supplemental motor vehicle list. Okay, so the main motor vehicle list we get it in November. The supplemental motor vehicle list covers any vehicle that's registered after October 1st. So if a vehicle is registered October 2nd, anywhere until July 31st, it comes on what's called a supplemental motor vehicle list. So then that gets a prorated bill, but it doesn't go out until the following January. So, for example, if last year somebody registered their motor vehicle on October 2nd, 2023, last year, they're not going to get their bill until this January of 25. And then, so they'll get that bill, and then in July, they'll get another bill for a full year. So it's very, very confusing for people. It's hard to understand. Very hard to understand. So many times people come in, I got rid of that car a year ago, well, you're just getting the bill now. And what happens is we get the supplemental motor vehicle list. Now, we haven't gotten that supplemental motor vehicle list. The supplemental motor vehicle list that we're going to get in November is going to be based on the October 2023 grand list year, so it'll be under the old system. So we get hit in January with that, and then in November with the supplemental list, and then a few weeks later, then we get our regular list from DMV. And all of this while we're trying to do our personal property and finalize our real estate grand list. So it gets very confusing and it's very complicated and it's very busy. Okay. Okay, so next one. Okay, so there's also inequity that exists across the state of Connecticut. So, for example, Hartford has a mill rate of 68.95. Salisbury has a mill rate of 11. So, if you had a $20,000 car in Hartford, you would be paying a tax bill of $965 for the same car that if it were in Salisbury, you'd be paying $154. So great disparity across the state in what the motor vehicle tax bill looks like. So a statute was enacted which did put a cap on motor vehicle cap rates. Not cap rates, mill rates, sorry about that. So now, currently, the motor vehicle mill rate cannot exceed 32.46. So some of the inequity has been removed, but in comparison to East Lyme's mill rate was 26.335. So that same car would have a tax bill of $368.90. Compared to the $154 in Salisbury, but it certainly is still better than the motor vehicle, the capped motor vehicle mill rate at 32.46. So Hartford, now with the capped mill rate, it's $454 would be the tax bill for that car compared to $965. So it did move a lot closer to equitable by having that cap, but it's still not completely equitable. And so as a result of some of these problems, they, in 2019, OPM established a regional assessment working group. They're the ones that came up with this idea to cap the motor vehicle rate. But they've been looking at changing the motor vehicle process since 2019. Then COVID happened. Okay, so they were already looking to change the way we value motor vehicles, or just to change the process to try and understand. Well, with COVID in 2020, our motor vehicle increase was 7.2%. Then at the height of the pandemic, when we had a huge demand and terrible supply issues, motor vehicle prices skyrocketed. They went up 31%. It still continued in 2022. We still had a number of people who were on waiting lists. And now finally we see that the market is trying to adjust. We had last year a decrease on our motor vehicle grand list of 5.65%. But it had gone up a significant amount. It had gone up, 44%, 45%. Okay, so now in 2022, the governor proposed this new bill, and it was to try and increase fair and an equitable system, transparency for taxpayers so they understood what their tax bill was going to be, more efficient administration, and labor and time savings for the assessors and staff. 3 public acts later and a special session, they finally, have worked out the kinks, and we now have something that we can implement. So now, under the new system, motor vehicles are going to be priced using the manufacturer's suggested retail price and a standardized depreciation schedule. The prices are no longer going to be based on market value. Connecticut Statute 14-163 provides that DMV will provide assessors with that MSRP on or before November 1st. So it's in the statute. We don't have to keep harassing DMV. Where's our list? Where's our list? Where's our list? We'll be able to get our list in November 1st. And then monthly, no later than November 15th. So then they're changing the supplemental motor vehicle list to be monthly. And that will help us out tremendously because it'll even out the workflow. We'll be able to price the vehicles as they come on the list. Most tax collectors, however, they don't want to bill monthly. It's difficult. So what they're going to do is bill in July and January to coincide with their regular bills. Make it much less confusing for taxpayers, and certainly help us in the assessor's office by, spreading out that workload. With changes, there's always some bad, some good. The additional good is that the months of August and September were added to the supplemental list before the supplemental list ended July 31st. So if you registered a vehicle in August and September, you didn't have to pay taxes on it for that first year that you registered that vehicle. So now we are getting August and September, which will help offset some of the things that you're going to see in some future slides. As I said, we do have the more transparency because we have the depreciation schedule. So because things are no longer priced using market value, there's no longer a need for anybody to come before the Board of Assessment Appeals to get an adjustment because their car looks like the smashed one on the right and not the one that we think it looks like on the left. So it evens that out because it's not based on market value anymore. It's based on the MSRP and the depreciation schedules. So boat trailers, utility trailers, enclosed trailers, snowmobiles, ATVs, all of those that are personal use are no longer going to be taxable. Oh, I was concerned about this. With us being a waterfront community, we have tons and tons of boat trailers. However, when I crunched the numbers, it wasn't so bad to lose the boat trailers, because although there were a lot of them, they're not valued that high. And if it's used by a business, it's still taxable. So any of our boat trailers would not be taxable, but Boat Inc.'s trailer would be taxable. Any enclosed trailer that we may have wouldn't be taxable. A landscaper's would be taxable. So we're not losing all of them, which was very good. And camp trailers and RVs are still taxable, which is important to us because we actually have 4 campgrounds in the town. And any out-of-state motor vehicles that are registered in out-of-state, if they're here seasonally at one of our campgrounds, they get a personal property tax bill for that. We are still going to be responsible for pricing everything that we had to price before. The newest model vehicles, the incomplete vehicles, the campers, the RVs, the commercial vehicles. That hasn't changed. The depreciation table starts at 85%. So this is where some of my concern comes in and some of why I'm addressing you for this evening. So if we take just a typical car, so we have a typical 2024 Subaru Outback new XT all-wheel drive turbo gas. Under the old system, we would look at typically equipped. Because when you go car shopping, you're not paying the base MSRP. The sticker goes down a long way, and sticker shock, it goes. So we go by the typically equipped times the 70% would give you an assessment of $29,130. Under the new system, they're taking the base MSRP. So that's $40,500. Now we're multiplying it times the depreciation schedule, so we're reducing it by 85%. It's already lower than what we would have used in the past. And we're multiplying it times the depreciation schedule, then taking the 70% assessment. And you can see in this one car, it's 17% lower. The loss in revenue on just that one car is 17% lower. So now the assessor organization, when they were doing some research to provide to the legislators, they had estimated an impact of 10%. It might have a negative impact of 10% on our grand list. But I saw this and I thought, let me do a little bit more work. So what I did was I took one random car for each model year from 2025 down to 2002. And I priced 2001, and I priced them out using the old system and the new system, and I calculated out the difference between the two. So in that sampling, the list was down 22%. So I thought that it's better to be forewarned. So this is, I don't have any lists yet. So these were just me taking random cars, and you can see some of the cars went down, and some, there were a few that actually were priced higher with the new system, but the majority were not. And the overall, in this small sampling, was an increase of 22%.
So not all cars depreciate at the same, you know, some cars hold their value longer than others, right? So does this,
That doesn't impact it at all.
no?
So it's a standard depreciation schedule. 85% is the top. It goes, so, and it's based on model year. So 24, 25, and 26 model years are all going to be based with the 85% depreciation. And then it drops 5% a year until you hit year 15. And then years 15 through 19, it's at 15%. And then after that, it says no less than $500. So 15% or no less than $500. So we may make up some at the end who might have had, at the bottom, who might have had cars that were paying less than $500, they're going to pay $500, which is also, if you have the antique plate, you're paying based on an assessment of $500.
So Diane,
Yes.
the numbers are hard for me to see, but you know them really well. Did you see a trend anywhere where some years ended up, because you said it wasn't true for all years, that there was a loss in revenue. Was there something tipping towards newer versus older, or it was just random?
So I haven't had enough time, since we don't have our new list, and I can't really, without doing it manually, like the way I just did it by choosing one for, you know, each model year, it's too early for me to try and see if there's trends. When we start pricing, you know, I might be able to find those trends, but it's a little too early for me to be able to understand. I have to be implementing it for a little bit longer. I thought that when I did my sample, I might see trends, but I think what I saw instead were just less popular models. You know, if it was a, if it was a less popular model, then the new system was better. But for anything that was a popular model, the new system, you know, was less.
But essentially, bottom line, your forewarning is that if we go with this 22% loss of income times the 7% that the motor vehicles make up, we can anticipate worst case scenario that loss of income going forward. Thank
Yes.
you for the forewarning.
And like I said, it's early days yet, so maybe it won't be as bad as I'm anticipating, because we do have the months of August and September on the supple, which will be helping to offset a little bit of this. But you know, until we get further into it, we don't, you know, I don't really have a good handle on it. And yes.
Sorry, so, it sounds like.
You know, Scott, since you're not on.
I'm not allowed to ask a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, just until you get sworn in, just to be.
So here I took a camper on a personal property list, and so this camper under the old system, we used retail times the 70% gave us an assessment of $27,790. With the new system, we took the MSRP, which was lower, we multiplied it, because it's 2014, it's at 35%, and that gave us an assessment of $9,434. In this particular camper, lost 66%. Now, campers don't make up a very large portion of our personal property, but it's, you know, it got me concerned. So I started looking. So I have recently had 12 campers come in. because it's personal property season now. November 1st they're due. So I priced those 12 campers, and the average loss in value on those 12 campers was 9%. So I haven't had a good sample to tell me, where is it? Is there a point at which it becomes better to have the new system? I just haven't had a big enough sampling size yet to be able to crunch the numbers to see those patterns.
Diane, I think if I recall correctly, when the state enacted the cap on the mill rate, so cities or towns like Hartford lost all that revenue. And I seem to recall that the state took action to compensate them in other ways for their loss of revenue. Has there been any talk that they would be doing something like this with this change to minimize the impact to the towns?
Not that I'm aware of. So, if we took a rough estimate and we did a reduction of 15% on our motor vehicle grand list, it would be a reduction of 805,000 tax dollars. So that's, wow.
A lot
And-
of challenges this year.
Yes. So the next section, does anybody have any questions on what I went over so far? Okay. So the next section is going to deal with the veterans exemptions. And first of all, to anybody who is a veteran in this room, I would like to thank you for your service. We owe our veterans a huge debt of gratitude for their service. So that being said, I'm just going to dive right into the new veterans legislation. So the new veterans exemption, what is exempt? A dwelling, including a condominium and a unit in common interest owned by any resident of the state who served in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force, that has a service-connected, permanent, and total disability rating, occupied by such resident as the resident's primary residence. If lacking such residence, one motor vehicle owned by such resident garaged in this state. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this, and then I'm going to show you examples of how it's applied. Okay. So who is exempt? Any resident of the state who has served in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force of the United States that has a service-connected, permanent, and total disability rating as determined by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. So this is different than a percentage of disability. If such resident lacks such dwelling, who is exempt? Let's continue. If such resident lacks such dwelling or motor vehicle in such resident's name, the dwelling or motor vehicle as applicable belonging to or held in trust for such resident's spouse who is domiciled with such resident shall be exempt. When any resident entitled to an exemption under the provision of the subdivision has died, the dwelling or motor vehicle belonging to or held in trust for such deceased resident's surviving spouse, while such spouse remains a widow or widower, or held in trust for such deceased resident's minor children during their minority, or both, shall be exempt. They're entitled to the exemption of the veterans at the time of the veteran's death. Okay, so the basic requirements. Be a resident of the state, have served in the branches Army, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force. It includes National Guard. Have a service-connected permanent and total disability rating as determined by the Department of Veterans Affairs. So this is different than some of our previous veterans exemptions. On our previous veterans exemptions, they had to, their DD-214 had to be on file, and they had to be approved for a certain period of war. In this, they just have to have served and be honorably discharged, and have that discharge on file in the office of the town clerk. So they have to have their DD-214 on file. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a permanent and total disability rating. So we, in the past, would code the veterans according to OPM by the percentage, and their benefit or their exemption would be determined by their percentage of disability. Now, it's not connected to their percentage of disability, but rather the language permanent and total disability rating. And they have to submit proof to us about their permanent and total disability rating from the Department of Veterans Affairs. What is a dwelling? Does the dwelling mean just the house is exempt, not the land or any outbuildings? So yes, just the house is exempt. It's not all of the excess acreage and the outbuildings. There's been a lot of confusion in regards to what veterans are hearing out there from coffee houses and different people in regards to what the exemption actually is. But it's just the house. Can a veteran choose how to apply the exemption? No, the state is very specific on how the exemption has to be applied. And this part is pretty important because, number one, if the veteran has the house in his or her name, then it goes first to the primary residence, and it's their primary residence. If they don't, if it's not in their name, then it would go to a motor vehicle owned by them in their name. If they don't have either of those in that order, then third, the dwelling or motor vehicle belonging or held in trust for the veteran's spouse. Then it gets applied. So if the dwelling is only in the non-veteran spouse's name, they don't get the veteran gets the exemption on their motor vehicle, not their house. Trusts, a lot of property are put in trusts. So if the P&T veteran has their property in a trust and is the primary beneficiary of the trust with no one else on the trust, are they eligible for the exemption? No, it would have to go on their car. If the property is owned by a trust and the spouse is the beneficiary of the trust, then it can go on the house. So it's been confusing. We have veterans come in daily asking about it. So the Department of Veterans Administration, Veterans Affairs, thought that we had 8 veterans that this would apply to. And they were originally talking about 100% disabled. But they changed the language to be the P and T. And so right now, as it stands, we currently have 30 approved veterans that would receive this exemption on their real estate and 6 that would receive it on their motor vehicle. There are an additional 44 that own real estate and 10 that have motor vehicles that are pending because they have a disability rating somewhere between 60 to 100%, but they don't have a letter on file with us currently. Either it's not been updated or, they don't qualify, but they don't have a total rating on the letter that they have on file. So these numbers can change. So the 30 veterans with the real estate assessment, the dwelling only times the mill rate would result in a tax loss of 109,606. Motor vehicles, 3,089, for the total tax reduction of 112,695. The worst-case scenario, if all of the pending had a letter with P&T on it, the total loss would be $315,692. So the combined possible impact, the motor vehicle loss estimated at 15%, with the approved veterans exemptions, which are an unfunded state mandate, would be $917,700.
And in terms of our budget year, so the budget we adopted is fine. 'Cause-
This goes into effect for the 2024 grand list year.
July 1 bills.
July 1 bills, yep. So, I mean, it could be anywhere from 900,000 to 1.2.
So really, if you if you think about it, the value of a mill to us is 2.8 million. So if it comes in, this is like our conservative estimate, would you say?
I tried to be, I mean, I think if I was going really conservative, I would have used the 10%, which they had told me, but I can't use 10% because my numbers don't reflect 10%. So unfortunately, yeah, I think it is a little bit conservative.
So this 900,000 is a third of a mill. So next year when we do our budget, we're starting at a third of a mill increase just by keeping everything else flat. So that's kind of the impact.
As I did mention, it's an unfunded state mandate, and when they were doing this, enacting this, working on this legislation, they didn't really consult with the assessors organization. And I think that they thought that the impact was going to be minimal. And what we're finding is, assessors are posting on our board all across the state what the tax dollar loss to them is. I don't know what it is now, what the estimate is now, but when only a third of the states had replied, it was like, something like $2.65 million. So, it might be something where we encourage the state to help us out. I just, it's.
And to that, have you had any discussions with Holly Cheeseman or any other of our representatives, or?
I have not at this point in time, but I think that we should do that. It's a lot to get hit with at once, and it's hard. Nobody quite understood what the impacts of this legislation would be.
Yeah. And again, nobody begrudges any of our veterans.
No,
this at all,
absolutely not. Absolutely not. It would, it's phenomenal. They absolutely deserve it, and it would be really nice if the state could help make that happen based on their new legislation. I think we've seen so many unfunded mandates.
Mhm.
And this one in particular, the combination of both of these, the impact right now on the municipalities is going to be hard.
Mhm. So I would just request, could we have this presentation either emailed to us or just posted on the Board of Finance meeting materials so that, and, yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. And I'm sure if there's any veterans out there that are watching, I know you guys do a great job in there of working with them, so make sure they raise their hand, because this is pretty complicated.
Yes, we are going to do an informational session for them to try and explain it all and, eliminate some of the wrinkles and help them plan for the future. Because if they don't have real estate in their name now,
Yeah. And maybe
they might change
the
that.
Legion or VFW might be good places to reach out to, too. Does anyone have any questions or comments for?
I just have an unrelated question to this, but it's an assessor question. It's been a while since I filled out a property tax return. But on the October 1st assessment date, do we get any credit for all that stuff that's up on 95?
We do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Every time I drive by those two cranes, I smile.
So if it's sitting there on October 1st, we get it.
Yes, so when you're
Okay.
getting aggravated sitting in the traffic there because it's taking forever to get through the light, just remember, they are paying personal property taxes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I saw a movie at the Waterford though on this.
Okay, great, thank you. On to the next item under new business. C is discussion and possible action, a capital improvement committee. So as we've been speaking for a number of months and talking about how we wanted to form a capital improvement committee so that instead of getting to, the budget time when we're going through everything in April, May, and kind of under the gun with the capital improvement plan, we wanted to see if we can't step back and have a committee that focused on it much earlier in the year. And that way we could kind of, it's not all when we're under the gun with the budget. So this was something that Kevin Gervais, our finance director, and Dan and I all thought would be a great idea. So it's been coming together. I don't know, Kevin, do you want to talk at all about how you came up with the
Sure.
proposal that we have here?
And thank you, and Diane and Daphne, for putting that together. It's scaring me earlier in the week.
Thank you.
But I digress. So yeah, what we have in front of us is a little executive summary, one-pager, of our plan, our proposal for the Capital Improvement Committee, Capital Improvement Program Committee, that we're hoping to roll out here mid-November, have a couple meetings with that board, that committee, and recommend a package to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance during the budget time. I think the first year it's probably going to be a heavy lift because we have to, kind of establish some processes on top of this committee, as well as kind of do the first bout of a 5 and 10 year capital plan, as well as the current year capital plan, right? So the initial proposal was 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members of the Board of Finance, 2 members of the Board of Education, and then a citizen representative from each of those boards. I believe at the last week Board of Selectmen meeting we appointed, or we may have tabled it, but we discussed it. Board of Ed this past couple weeks ago, they appointed a member to this board, as well as their Board of Ed business manager, Mariana Stevens, and the superintendent, Jeff Newton. So there's their 3 members. So tonight we are hoping for the board to put up 2 members and the citizen representative.
So I would like to volunteer to be on the committee.
That's tribute.
And I think we have another volunteer. So John would like to be on this committee as well. I have reached out to someone for the member of the public. I haven't heard back yet. As soon as we do, and if that person says no, I'm also going to look to all of you. If you know of anybody that might be a good addition to the committee, let me know. So, with that,
So it was Denise and John?
yeah, and we're just going to make that motion.
Oh,
to make
okay,
it.
great, great, official.
Yes. So, John?
Okay, I'll make a motion concerning a proposal for capital improvement program committee. The town, inclusive of the Board of Education, would like to consider establishing a formal capital improvement program committee following the best practices for such a committee as detailed by the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, and others. The boards of Selectmen, Finance, and Education would establish administrative structure for the CIP process, establish the policy framework for the CIP, and formulate evaluation criteria to determine capital spending levels and to guide capital project selection. The committee would be comprised of A, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen plus 1 member of the public, B, 2 members of the Board of Finance plus 1 member of the public, and C, 2 members of the Board of Education plus 1 member of the public.
And the 2 members of the Board of Finance will be?
2 members of the Board of Finance will be Lauren McNamara and John Birmingham.
No, Denise.
Hmm?
Denise.
Denise.
Denise Hall and John
Denise Hall.
Birmingham. Yep. Okay, thank you. Next is, oh, I got to vote. All those in favor? Oh, second?
I'll take it.
Second.
Discussion.
All those in favor?
Wait.
Oh, sorry, you have a
Should
discussion?
after
Sure.
second?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could we back up? Kevin, you'd mentioned the Board of Ed had designated their 3 individuals. And could you go through that again, who they are?
Yep, so, stand by. So it's Jeff Newton is one of the members, Mariana Stevens is another member, and Jill Carini is the Board of Ed member. So that's their 3 members. So so Jill Carini is the Board of Ed member, and then instead of having 2 Board of Eds, they did the superintendent as one of them, and then the Board of Business Manager as the citizen representative, because they both live in town.
Okay, it's interesting that they don't have 2 members and a citizen, that they have 2 town employees for the Board of Education. It doesn't really pass the smell test to me.
So I made my recommendation, and when they came out of the meeting on September 23rd, that's when they voted for those agreements.
Okay, does that follow the intent of your composition of this committee?
It gives me 3 members from the Board of Ed. So, you know, I don't really want to.
Okay, I won't hold you to that. And I have no problems with the people that we have nominated from this. I just am hoping that the composition of this committee will be of a nonpartisan nature. So, okay.
And then all town department heads and any town employees with some level of insight and input to this will be, you know, requested to come to these meetings and give presentations on their department's requests and collaborate
Right.
with all departments.
Okay.
And just sort of, so at the very end of it, they recommend a package to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, right? So it's a recommendation. So just, they put their time in, kind of, present the package forward. So I just wanted that out there.
So going forward, this committee will present to the Board of Selectmen rather than the department heads presenting to the Board of Selectmen during the budget process?
For the capital side?
For the capital side.
Correct.
Okay.
And I mean, maybe they touch upon their capital items, a couple slides at the end of their operating budget, kind of what they do now, right? We spend all the time on the operating,
And I think what this does too is really, it holds everybody's feet to the fire more. Because I think lots of times things get thrown out there in the 5-year and the 10-year, and they just keep moving along. And so I think this will put some discipline around it. And I think, to your point, Kevin, too, it should be a driver of what can the town afford. Because there'll be more realistic numbers going out there.
And I think one thing too, what projects are, shovel ready, ready to go today, versus, some departments, maybe they get the request they wanted and they don't touch it for 2 years. So there's 2 years of money set aside. Other departments could use that money the first year, so maybe just, prioritization. There's a lot to it. This is all.
And in addition, it's, in the past, it seemed to me, my sense of it was that oftentimes these amounts were just used as placeholders and without any real strategic planning going on. And it was at a rush, we finally got the budget done, everybody's tired, and it just kind of gets pushed through. This way, there'll be time taken with a panel that's knowledgeable and really apply some strategic ideas and planning. So as we allocate, these timeframes and amounts to be spent, there'll be some real thought put into it, where maybe in the past it was more of a rush. So hopefully we'll benefit from that.
Any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of appointing, oops, I was going to let you do that, but whatever. So motion has been made and seconded. We've had discussion. All those in favor of, signify by saying aye. Aye. And any opposed? No. This is kind of an unusual, it's not really one of our normal motions that we make where we're taking a specific kind of a, and our next item on the agenda is also a little funny one too. So this is a discussion and possible action in regard to unaffiliated description of benefits. Did you want to?
Sure. So I didn't print it out because it's a little lengthy, but I emailed to everybody the latest copy of the non-affiliated agreement, like package of benefits. It's from 2019. It was adopted by the Board of Selectmen. And there's a lot of things that are outdated, like it mentions an HSA. We're now on the state partnership plan. And there's been a growing appetite amongst the non-affiliateds to kind of get that updated so they know what their benefits actually are, and just have it more updated. It hasn't been updated in 5 years. So the non-affiliateds, after our department head meeting last week, nominated 3 individuals to represent the non-affiliated group before members of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and 1 member of the Water and Sewer Commission. Miss anything? I think I did pretty good there. So that's the high and low of it. So it's really just going through the current benefits package, and working with myself, our labor attorney, and working with the representatives from the non-affiliateds to come to a new, updated set of benefits.
Okay. And so, again, tonight we were looking for volunteers to take part in these discussions. And I know we have an attorney up here.
Yes, I'm happy to volunteer.
Okay. And as chair, I'm happy to volunteer as well. But if there's someone who would like to otherwise, I'm happy to give them the opportunity too. Seeing none, then, and on this one, are we also looking for a citizen or resident, or just
not for
two
this
here?
one.
I didn't think so. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure. So, okay, that.
Make the motion. move to appoint members of the Board of Finance to a committee to discuss the unaffiliated description of benefits, and those members would be Denise Hall and myself, Lauren McNamara.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? No. Motion carries. 5-0.
So our plan for that committee is on October 16th. The Board of Selectmen will vote for their members. The following week, I think it's the 23rd, Water and Sewer meets. They'll appoint their member, at which time you will send an email to all the members and try to get everybody in a room, and just hash out a couple dates to meet and get the discussions going, because we need that for the budget season. So.
Okay. So on to new business, item E, police outside service and pension discussion. So I had asked Kevin to put this on the agenda just because we have had a number of questions from people on all of the overtime that the police are getting with the state project, which is a little bit, when it comes to overtime, a little bit different from what the town has experienced prior to this past year. It used to be, there was overtime for private duty, but not to the extent and the duration of this 4-year project. So this definitely is having an impact on our budget, and it's also something that we have been discussing in the pension board meeting. So this is something that Kevin put this graph together. If you want to kind of walk through it, Kevin.
Sure. So what I did was break down an hour of private duty billing for the police department. So right now, when everyone sees all those vehicles on the side of the road up there up in Flanders, rebuilding that I-95 bridge, as of October 1st, we are charging $128.44 an hour. Prior to that, we were charging $114 an hour. We did a little regional assessment, talking to Waterford, Ledyard, some other towns. We saw they were in the 128, 129, 130 range. I found the state police's private duty rate, it was, I think, 134.75. So we're bringing this up more in line with our regional peers, as well as Denise said in our pension board meeting, we are anticipating a actuarially determined employer contribution of $550,000. The actuary shocked us with over $800,000 this year we have to make, and his verbiage was expect the same next year. So next year we're looking at, I think it was 1.2 million. This, like I said, this past year was 550,000. So in 2 years' time, we've more than doubled our contribution that we have to make to the pension. So essentially, I mentioned before the number was $114. Really what we did was increased the pension percentage of this. So before, the pension made up 12%. The pension calculation was 12% of the duty rate. Looking at our peers, talking with our actuaries, we've bumped that up to 25%, right? So what we're going to do is, in the general fund, we have budgeted for this money to come in, because the town makes a contribution to the pension, and we know private duty is counted 1-to-1 for police officers' retirement towards their pension, right? So if they work $50,000 in private duty overtime, that's in their pensionable earning calculation, right? So this number kind of gets set aside in the general fund, and then every year we remit the employer contributions. What I think we should do, in discussions just at the pension board meeting today, we have a budget of $100,000 for this pension line here. Anything more than that this year, I think we should remit directly to the pension plan, right? And that'll offset or increase in need for higher contributions next year, hopefully. And then in this discussions for fiscal 26's operating budget. Maybe we reduce that altogether out of the general fund and just make the contribution 1-to-1 directly into the plan. So as every month we, we bring in all this money, right? Instead of having it sit in the general fund in our fund balance, we remit it right into the pension plan.
And one
Right.
of the benefits of that is funds in the general fund can only be invested in short-term money market instruments at a lower interest rate typically than what we're able to get in the
Investments.
pension in investments. And so this would allow those funds to be on a monthly basis invested in the market instead of on a yearly basis making the move.
So, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so with your pie chart, you've got the 14% for pension, it's now going to be 25%?
No, so let me just this pie chart shows the breakdown of the $128. That the pension number, this $18, is 25% of the duty rate, which the police officers make, right? So I know that was a little confusing. That's why I scrolled down because I'm like, oh no, I'm going to confuse people. So that's just, of the $128, a pension makes up 14% of it. But really, the $18 here is 25% of what we're paying the police officer to, work the job, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Is,
then-
is there a way to adjust that so that the amount that is taken for pension is actually higher than that 18% and higher than the 14%? And is there a need to have capped at 128, the 128 pay rate?
So we had a discussion earlier. Some departments charge for that fuel and admin line. They charge a flat 10%. So we're charging $5, right? $3 goes to fuel, and $2 goes to. It might hit that general pension line, same line. But other towns charge $10 there, right? So every town charges slightly different. This was, we were doing this at the end of September, just a couple weeks ago, last week, because we were sending out the bills for September. So we want to include a letter to all our vendors saying, hey, effective October 1st, here's the new rate. So we've established this rate at $128.44 as of October 1st. Before it was $114 an hour. So, and the only difference there was directly the pension, the percentage of the pension.
Okay.
And the pension board today discussed raising
Increasing the
that
fuel and admin line.
to 10.
Yeah.
Oh, increasing the fuel and admin to 10, so
Mhm.
that your rate then would be
133.
133.
133.44. That's still below the state of Connecticut. So,
Yeah, it's only 1.77 multiplier, that's on the low side.
for what? Say that again, sorry.
The multiplier on that's kind of low, but, it's bringing up to at least where other municipalities have it,
Yeah.
or at least the state.
Yep.
Maybe it's just a question for Dan. Who determines how many cruisers are working the construction site on Exit 74?
I don't know if it's the police chief or the police commission that makes that determination. I think what they do is they first offer it to a police officer from East Lyme if they want to take the shift. And then if they don't have anyone that wants to shift, then they think they go to other municipalities. I've seen Montville cruisers there, and I think Waterford. So it first gets offered to the East Lyme police if they want to take the shift.
No, the only reason I asked, this afternoon I was coming up Flanders Road,
Yep.
and I know there's a lot of construction going on, and between Starbucks and Flanders Bakehouse, there were 5 cruisers sitting on the side of the road. So I just wondered,
I think the need is determined probably by the project manager, and as they see the need that they have, let's say they need 6 cruisers,
yeah,
they would offer that to East Lyme if there's police available that want to take the shift.
yeah.
It's offered to them first, and then if there is no one to take the shift, then it goes to one of the other municipalities. They're offered
Yeah.
the shift.
I know
But
a lot, I know there's a lot of work there. I was just curious when I.
Been a lot of, there's a lot of police
Yeah.
presence there, and, but, you know, it's necessary to keep
Sure.
everything's, I have to say, they've done a pretty good job of keeping it moved pretty
I mean,
smoothly.
traffic, it went down to one lane under the bridge, and it was flowing pretty good.
Yeah. And I didn't make this in my report, but they intend to have, I think by December 15th, they want traffic flowing over the new bridge on I-95. And there's a contract goal. I mean, they get penalized if they're not up on if I-95 northbound isn't on that new bridge by then, they pay a penalty. So that's why you're seeing a lot of intensity out there right now.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, I just want to thank you for doing this because I felt like I was raising alarms early in the project, and it's nice to hear that the alarms were listened to, and the tension is going to be a big swallow.
So if anyone's listening at home and it's tough to see the illustration, the graph we have on the screen here, if you go to the finance page or the Board of Finance page on our town website, there's a materials tab. So everything we've put on tonight, Mike Mines emailed me back. The presentation, Diane's presentation will be on later tonight. So everything we hand out will be online as well for the people to look at.
And if you could maybe break it out with a date, so, because it's kind of hard to tell whether the meeting, the material was for tonight's meeting or the previous
Maybe we'll
meeting.
make
So just make it a little,
subfolders.
yeah, that would be great.
If you're listening, Mike, subfolders.
Okay, so, yes, and thank you, Richard, because I think, you brought up questions and we've gotten them from the public too, so I think this should answer all those questions, so thank you. Next on the agenda is executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss public safety legal services.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're
Any
gonna
opposed?
invite me in?
No, we're going to
Invite me
move
in?
into executive session and, yes, sorry. So,
Do I come back?
you know what? I wouldn't bother if I were you, because there's probably, nothing really left on the agenda, but if you can, email Karen Galbo. All those in favor?
Aye.
By saying aye. Aye. Do we have to do that again for the recorder to know that we came out of executive session?
No, I made the motion. Executive session, I would have separate minutes. You'd have a separate set of minutes for executive session. No, if we didn't take
We
any
didn't take any
actions.
action, so there's no. Okay, so we came out of executive session with no action taken. So the next item on the agenda is public discussion. If there's any member of the public who wants to address us on anything that comes before the Board of Finance. And if you could state your name and address.
Yes. Good evening. I'm Norm Peck, 32 West Main Street, Niantic. I'm here as president of the East Lyme Historical Society. My purpose here is to make sure when allotting money towards nonprofit organizations under this coming year's budget, that you are fully aware of what the East Lyme Historical Society adds to our town. But first, I must say, in behalf of all the affected nonprofits, this year's reduction came as a real surprise and might be perceived as an opinion of the town towards these nonprofit organizations. Yes, we are the low-hanging fruit, but I feel that there's potential in town to save serious money elsewhere, but it would take more effort and time, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody about that. The maintenance of our town treasure, the Thomas Lee House, circa 1697, probably the oldest house in Connecticut that is still in its primitive state, is no small task. Most books you'll find about New England historical homes, you'll find this house mentioned and described in architectural books as well. It's quite interesting. The Little Boston Schoolhouse next door, circa 1803, is a similar cost per square foot to maintain. Tours are given all year long at no charge. Lee descendants from all over the country call in advance regularly to experience their ancestral roots. Our free of charge winter lecture series often are attended by about 75 people. Our 5th grade hands-on colonial workshop has educated a generation of children from our school system. We receive weekly calls from people all over the country searching for information on family members. Our town historian and treasurer of the society gladly accommodates the curious from a massive organized collection of information not yet readily available to the public online. We also maintain the Dr. Lee Cottage on the corner of Giants Neck Road and West Main Street. Many thousands we have spent over the years on this building, circa 1860, and it belongs to the town. Most of the land that we maintain for this Lee House and the Lee House grounds belongs to the town. We have never asked for support from the town except the annual $2,250 that has been our allowance for decades. This $2,250 is about 10% of our budget of regular reoccurring income and expenses. We have a 250th anniversary of our country coming up in 2026. The Historical Society organized the 200th anniversary celebration. Who do you think will do this one? We are working towards opening a museum to further celebrate this great town and instill a greater appreciation of it. Under the guidance of the state archaeologist, we hold annual family archaeological digs on the Lee House grounds. It fascinates young and old. For years, we have allowed the high school archaeology class to perform digs in the spring and fall on the same grounds. We sponsor the Indigenous Peoples Day program at McCook's Point Park, which was the site of the summer camp for many Niantics for centuries. For the Niantic Fire Department, we store their very first fire truck in our barn. It had been at the community center alcove prior to adding on to our barn to accommodate this hand pumper. This, along with a Niantic horse-drawn mail wagon, exists there, which was donated recently by the Sisters of the American Revolution. They wanted it back in its proper place. Every August, we host a group of Niantic descendants at the Lee House for a program of sharing information and planning. We have gathered a mass quantity of verbal and written history from these folks who descended, spread all over the country for the last few hundred years. A tremendous quantity of verbal and written history is yet to be organized into a book, which is part of our plan. We have recently partnered with the East Lyme Library in our museum project. This enables us access to better grant writing along with other fundraising efforts. Our hard-working board of directors work in harmony. It's a great bunch and are dedicated to our mission. As we are purely a volunteer organization, and all money goes directly to our educational and preservation projects. Every dollar is efficiently spent. Please help us remember, educate, and inspire through the careful sharing of East Lyme history as we have done since 1897 by restoring the allowance of $2,250. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do appreciate all the work that you do and commend you for your volunteerism. Seeing that we don't have any other public here, we'll move on to board comments. Does anyone have anything that they would like to share? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.